Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself in the world as you're watching this. Welcome to Uncovering Our Hidden History. My name is Anna. If this is your first time with us, I am a genealogist and historical researcher, and I use those two tools to uncover history that we've been lied to or that's been hidden. And also, if this is your first time with us, we just finished up with our Kingdom of Israel in Tartaria and America series. And we are now beginning the first video in our Kingdom of Judah series. So we covered the Northern Kingdom, and now we're going to cover the Southern Kingdom. So stay tuned. I have lots of interesting things to show you. Hello, precious friends. I hope you're well. And I just have a heavy heart today. This video has been really difficult to put together just because of the content being so heavy. And this, I'm just going to simply say that this is going to be a very somber video and a lot of hard information. And I think some of you have mentioned that you use these videos or some of these videos for homeschooling. I would say this video probably not for little ones. So maybe teenagers, if you're going to do that. It's just a very somber video, and so, but it needs to be talked about. I have had so much trouble trying to get through this video because, like I talked about in the last video regarding like the Torah and the Targum and the Apocrypha, that, Scripture is alive. The words are alive, because it doesn't matter if you're reading something from 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. It has the ability to be present right now. It's like the words can apply today, and they still have power, and they can evoke emotion. And just, I thought that this was not going to be a big deal. I already had a lot of the slides prepared, but I wasn't prepared for the Ruach, the Father, to have the Ruach HaKodesh really lean on me to go digging for information into the prophets and things regarding this subject. And so as an intercessor, I tend to be a little bit more of an empathic person anyway, and so I'm very sensitive to the emotional stuff around me, and things just touch me deeply, which as an intercessor and a person of prayer, that's, a good thing. But anyway, this is just, this is going to be a somber video. So let's just get to it. Okay, let me get my slideshow. Okay, the Southern Kingdom of Judah. What became of them after Rome destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD? Okay, we're going to go back a little bit before, because there was a lot of things that happened actually before that time. Okay, so we're going to cover from 63 AD up till about 66 AD in this section. Josephus, a Judean historian who near the end of the 1st century wrote 2 books about the Judeo-Roman War fought from 67 to to 73 AD. He identified himself as a Jewish priest, a member of the royal Hasmonean, well, actually he was a Judean priest, a member of the royal Hasmonean family, a Judean general, and a Roman prisoner who became a guide for the Roman army after Jerusalem was destroyed. So I'll just say here, he actually had been taken captive when one of the Judean towns fell, and then the Most High gave him favor with the Romans, so they didn't imprison him, but they used him to try to appeal to his people. Excuse me. So therefore, Josephus was an eyewitness to all of the events that he wrote about. As seen through his eyes, he described the Judean revolt, the siege and destruction of Jerusalem, and the mass suicide of the Masada inhabitants in 73 AD. In fact, Josephus gives us our only account of what happened at Masada. When the wars ended, Jerusalem was in ruins, over 1 million Judeans were dead, and the last remnants of Israel had vanished, as was foretold by the prophets of the Old Testament, and Tanakh, and by Mashiach himself. Josephus recorded in his Jewish Wars a series of very interesting and prophetic events that occurred in Jerusalem beginning in 63 AD. In Book 6, Chapter 5, Section 3, he wrote, "About 4 years before the war with Rome, while the city was enjoying all of the blessings of peace, there came up to a festival a rustic, who stood up in the temple and called aloud, 'A voice from the east, a voice from the west, a voice from the four winds, a voice against Jerusalem and the sanctuary, a voice against the bridegrooms and brides, a voice against all the people.' Day and night he walked up and down the streets with this cry. Some of the people, bothered by his noise, caught hold of him and beat him. But he only kept on crying out as before. At length, the rulers brought him before the Roman procurator, who caused him to be scourged until his flesh was bare to the bone. He neither sued for mercy nor shed a tear, but cried aloud at every stroke, 'Woe, woe to Jerusalem!' When the procurator asked him who he was and whence he came and why he uttered these words, he made no reply, but only repeated over and over again, 'Woe, woe to Jerusalem!' Until the breaking out of the war, he continued this cry and spoke to none of the citizens, neither thanking those who gave him food nor cursing those that beat him. For 7 years and 5 months he continued his wail, nor did his voice become feeble, nor did he grow weary. At length, as he was going round upon the wall during the siege," so this would be after the war had started, "crying with his piercing voice, 'Woe, woe once more to the city, to the people, and to the temple.' And then he suddenly added, 'Woe, woe also to myself,' and was immediately struck dead by a stone." Then in 66 AD, Josephus tells us, "There were the miserable people persuaded by these deceivers, the false prophets, and such as belied the Most High himself, while they did not attend nor give credit to the signs that were so evident and did so plainly foretell their future desolation, but like men infatuated, without either eyes to see or minds to consider, they did not regard the denunciation that the Most High made to them. There was a star resembling a sword," so a star shaped like a sword, "which stood over the city, and a comet that continued a whole year. Thus also before the Judeans' rebellion and before those commotions which preceded the war, when the people were come in great crowds to the feast of unleavened bread on the 8th day of the month, And at the 9th hour of the night, so great a light shone around the altar and the holy house that it appeared to be bright daytime. And this lasted for half an hour. The light seemed to be a good sign to the unskillful or ignorant, but was so interpreted by the sacred scribes as to portend those events that followed immediately upon it. So these publicly declared, the sacred scribes declared, that this signal foreshadowed the desolation that was coming upon them. Besides these, a few days after that feast, on the 21st day of the month, a certain prodigious and incredible phenomenon appeared. I suppose the account of it would seem to be a fable were it not related by those that saw it, and were not the events that followed it of so considerable a nature as to deserve such signals. For before sunsetting, chariots and troops of soldiers in their armor were seen running about among the clouds and the surrounding of the cities. Moreover, at that feast which we call Pentecost, as the priests were going by night into the inner court of the temple, as was their custom, to perform their sacred ministrations, they said that, in the first place, they felt a quaking, and heard a great noise, and after that they heard a sound as of a great multitude, saying, "Let us remove from here." So there was an earthquake, and a great noise, and after the noise the sound of a great multitude saying, let us remove here, but they saw nobody. At the same festival also a heifer, which is a cow, female cow, as she was led by the high priest to be sacrificed, she brought forth a lamb in the midst of the temple. So a heifer, a cow, giving birth to a lamb in the midst of the temple. Moreover, the eastern gate of the inner court of the temple, which was made of brass and vastly heavy, and had to be with difficulty shut by 20 men, and it rested upon a basis armed with iron, and had bolts that fastened very deep into the firm floor, of which there was made just of one entire stone. This door was seen to be opened of its own accord about the 6th hour of the night. There are other corroborating accounts of these same events as told by the ancient historians Tacitus, Eusebius, and also written in the Sefer Josephus. Tacitus, in his Histories, Book 5, says, "Prodigies had occurred which this Judean nation, prone to superstition, but hating all religious rites, did not deem it lawful to expiate by offering and sacrifice. There had been seen hosts joining battle in the skies, the fiery gleam of arms, the temple illuminated by a sudden radiance from the clouds. The doors of the inner shrine were suddenly thrown open, and a voice of more than mortal tone was heard to cry that the Elohim were departing. At the same instant there was a mighty stir as of many persons departing." Some few put a fearful meaning on these events, but in most there was a firm persuasion that in the ancient records of their priests was contained a prediction of how at this very time the East was to grow powerful, and rulers coming from Judea were to acquire universal empire. So some of these, especially the false prophets, they poo-pooed all of this and said, oh, no, we have it written in our ancient records that we're going to be powerful rulers, right? And govern a universal empire. So they didn't heed these signs. Eusebius, in his Ecclesiastical History, Book 3, Chapter 8, Sections 1 through 6, said, "Thus were the miserable people won over at this time by the impostors and the false prophets. But they did not heed nor give credit to the give credit to the visions and signs that foretold the approaching desolation. On the contrary, as if struck by lightning, and as if possessing neither eyes nor understanding, they slighted the proclamations of the Most High. At one time a star, in form like a sword, stood over the city, and a comet, which lasted for a whole year. And again, before the revolt and before the disturbances that led to the war, when the people were gathered for the feast of unleavened bread, on the 8th of the month, at the 9th hour of the night, so great a light shone about the altar and the temple that it seemed to be bright as day. And this continued for a half an hour. This seemed to the unskillful a good sign, but was interpreted by the sacred scribes as portending those events which very soon took place. And at the same feast a cow, led by the high priest to be sacrificed, brought forth a lamb in the midst of the temple. Eusebius continued, and the eastern gate of the inner temple, which was of bronze and very massive, and at which at evening was closed with difficulty by 20 men, and rested upon iron-bound beams, and had bars sunk deep in the ground, was seen at the 6th hour of the night to open of itself. And not many days after the feast, on the 21st of the month, a certain marvelous vision was seen which passes belief. The prodigy might seem fabulous were it not related by those who saw it, and were not the calamities which followed deserving of such signs. For before the setting of the sun, chariots and armed troops were seen throughout the whole region. So this is not just over Jerusalem. This is all throughout Judea and the whole region. People were seeing this. and these chariots and troops were seen wheeling through the clouds and encircling the cities. And then at the feast, which is called Pentecost or Shavuot, when the priests entered the temple at night, as was their custom, to perform the services, they said at first they perceived a movement and a noise, and afterward a voice as a great multitude saying, "Let us go hence," meaning let us leave here. Then in the Sefer Josephus, which is a medieval history of ancient Israel from the 10th century AD, written in Hebrew, while mentioning about the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, it also mentions about the vision of soldiers and chariots seen in the sky. Sefer Josephus was translated from Hebrew to English by Stephen B. Bowman, and here are excerpts from chapter 87, the section Burning of the Temple. It says, "Moreover, in those days were seen chariots of fire and horsemen, a great force flying across the sky near to the ground, coming against Jerusalem, and all the land of Judah, all of them horses of fire and riders of fire. When the holy day of Shavuot came in those days, during the night, the priests heard within the temple something like the sound of men going, and the sound of men marching in a multitude, going into the temple, and a terrible and mighty voice was heard speaking, 'Let us go and leave this house.'" Okay, so I'm guessing the majority of you have probably not read that before or heard that before. Okay, so now let's see. So that led up to 60. So all of that phenomenon was in 66 AD, except for the prophet guy who, for 4 years or more, starting in 63 AD, wailing about the fall of Jerusalem. So now let's see what happens. So what we call the Jewish wars, or the Roman Jewish wars, then began right after the phenomenon in 67 AD, and they went to 70 AD. So when we talk about the fall and the destruction of Jerusalem, it was not a one and done thing. It's not like Rome just came in and sacked them in 70 AD. There was actually 3.5 years of wars between the two. So all of the events mentioned by Josephus and the retelling by these other historians happened in 66 AD. Then began the war with Rome, starting in 67 AD. Those arrogant and prideful false prophets and religious leaders did not have the eyes to see and ears to hear to understand that the presence of the Most High had officially left the temple. In 69 AD, Simon Bar Giora had raised an army. So what this is going to be talking about is there were 3 zealots, 3 rebels or insurgents that rose up, 3 different factions. So in 69 AD, Simon Bar Giora had raised an army to go to Jerusalem to support the priests and the aristocracy. They made him the ruler of the city, but the zealots held part of the city. By the spring of 70 AD, the city was split 3 ways between these zealots. John of Gischala, who held the Temple Mount, Simon Bar Giora in the upper city, and Eleazar of the upper class in the actual temple itself. The 3 competing factions would continue to fight each other, even as they all fought against the Romans. Eventually, John's men killed Eleazar, reducing the factions down to 2. On Passover of 70 AD, Titus and his army appeared. Titus was the son of Vespasian. Okay. And it says that Titus built camps around the city and made a siege of Jerusalem. And the siege of Jerusalem officially began on May 1st of 70 AD. Josephus went every day under orders to try and negotiate a surrender. But the stubborn Judeans were not interested. Inside Jerusalem, the leaders of the factions, Simon and John, were both hoping to establish a new monarchy of their own, so they stubbornly refused. Josephus begged them one last time to surrender in order to spare the temple. He even implored them to come outside of the temple and die in the open so as not to put the temple at risk. To prevent the Romans from coming over the northern wall, the Judeans set fire to the section they were assaulting. The next day, the whole northern wall was ablaze, and the Romans came into the outer courtyard, also known as the Court of the Gentiles. Inside the courtyard, the Romans put ladders on the temple's walls, and set fire to the gates. On August 10th, a Roman soldier threw a burning torch into the Holy of Holies, setting the giant tapestry on fire. In a frenzy now, the Romans began looting the temple of all its treasures. Along with all the zealot soldiers, 6,000 civilians were slaughtered in the temple. The temple had treasure chambers similar to safety deposit boxes for the priests and the rich Judeans, and the Romans took great plunder from them. According to Josephus, the gold taken from Jerusalem was so great that the price of gold was halved in the empire. After the fires were extinguished, all the stones were pried up, looking for melted gold. So now we're actually going to hear from Josephus regarding these events, because we need to hear from, an eyewitness account. In his great Roman-Jewish War, 66 to 70 AD, he related the following. Now, of those that perished by famine in the city, the number was prodigious, and the miseries they underwent were unspeakable. For if so much as the shadow of any kind of food did anywhere appear, a war was commenced presently, and the dearest friends fell fighting one with another about, snatching from each other the most miserable supports of life. So let me just say here, remember, we read that the Romans laid siege to Jerusalem and to the holy city. So that means that once the food war, was out, they had no means of getting any more food in. So first the siege, and then comes the famine. It was a terrible famine. He said, nor would men believe that those who were dying had no food, but the robbers would search them as they were expiring, lest anyone should have any concealed food in their bosoms, and counterfeit or pretend that they were dying. Nay, these robbers gaped for want, and ran about stumbling and staggering like mad dogs, and reeling against the doors of the houses like drunken men. They would also, in great distress, rush into the very same houses 2 or 3 times in one day. Moreover, their hunger was so intolerable that it obliged them to chew everything, while they gathered such things as the most sordid animals would not even touch, and endured to eat them. They did not abstain from girdles and shoes, and the very leather which belonged to their shields they pulled off and gnawed on. Then there was a certain woman that dwelt beyond the Jordan. Let me see if I can get this over here. There we go. Then there was a certain woman that dwelt beyond the Jordan. Her name was Mary. She was eminent for her family and her wealth. And she had fled to Jerusalem with the rest of the multitude, and was with them besieged at this time. While the famine pierced through her very bowels and marrow, she then attempted a most unnatural thing, and snatching up her son, who was a child sucking at her breast, and said, O thou miserable infant, for whom shall I preserve thee in this war, this famine, and this sedition? If the Romans preserve our lives, we must be slaves. Yet these seditious robbers are more terrible than both the other. Come now, be thou my food, and be a fury to these seditious varlets, and a byword to the world, which is all that is now wanting to complete the calamities of us Judeans. As soon as she had said this, she slew her son, and then roasted him. Eating the one half of him, she kept the other half by her concealed. Upon this, the seditious came in presently, and smelling the horrid scent of this food, they threatened her that they would cut her throat immediately if she did not show them what food she had gotten ready. She replied that she had saved a very fine portion of it for them, and then uncovered what was left of her son. Hereupon they were seized with a horror and an amazement of mind, and stood astonished at the sight. Whence she said to them, Come, eat of this food, for I have eaten of it myself. After which those men went out trembling, being never so much affrighted at anything as they were at this. And with some difficulty they left the rest of that meat to the mother. Upon which the whole city was full of this horrid action immediately. So then everybody began to eat their children or their family members. And then Josephus says, while the house was on fire, so while the holy house was on fire, everything was plundered that came to hand, and a countless multitude of those who were caught were slain. Nor was there a commiseration of any age or of any reverence of gravity, but children and old men and profane persons and priests were all slain in the same manner. So that this war went round all sorts of men and brought them to destruction, as well as those that made supplication for their lives, as those that defended themselves by fighting. The flame was also carried a long way and made an echo, together with the groans of those that were slain. And because this hill was high, and the works at the temple were very great, one would have thought that the whole city had been set on fire. Nor can one imagine anything either greater or more terrible than this noise, for there was at once a shout of the Roman legions who were marching all together, and a sad clamor of the seditious, who were now surrounded with fire and sword. The people also that were cut off above were beaten back upon the enemy, and under a great consternation. Yet was the misery itself more terrible than this disorder. For one would have thought that the hill itself on which the temple stood was being torn up by the root, full of fire on every part of it, that the blood was even larger in quantity than the fire, and those that were slain were more in number than those that slew them. For the ground did nowhere appear visible, due to the dead bodies that laid on it. But the soldiers went over heaps of those bodies as they ran upon them, such as fled from them. So there's no visible ground anywhere, just bodies everywhere, and people are running on top of the bodies. As for the priests, some of them plucked up from the holy house the spikes that were upon it, with their bases, which were made of lead, and shot them at the Romans instead of darts. And now the Romans, seeing that it was burnt all of those places, and also the remains of the cloisters and the gates, 2 excepted. Both, however, they demolished afterwards. They also burnt down the treasure chambers, in which was an immense quantity of money, and an immense number of garments, and other precious goods. The soldiers also came to the rest of the cloisters that were in the outer court of the temple, whether the rest of the cloisters that were in the outer court of the temple, whether the women, children, and a great mixed multitude of the people fled. Before Caesar had determined anything about these people, or given the commanders any orders relating to them, the soldiers were in such a rage that they had set the cloister on fire, by which means it came to pass that some of these were destroyed by throwing themselves down headlong, and some were burnt in the cloisters themselves, nor did any one of them escape with their life. A false prophet was the occasion of these people's destruction, who had made a public proclamation in the city that very day, that the Most High commanded the people to get up on the temple, and that there they should receive miraculous signs of their deliverance. So instead of these people being able to flee or to surrender to the Romans, which Titus had given them opportunity after opportunity to just surrender. Josephus was pleading for them to surrender, to spare lives and to spare the holy place. But these insurgents, the 3 and then down to 2, kept fighting. And then if anybody did want to actually try to go surrender, the insurgents would kill them and then throw them over the wall. So this is going on for days and days and days. And this is why the soldiers were in such a rage. Okay. And it says, now there was then a great number of false prophets, not just that one. There was a great number of false prophets suborned by the tyrants, by the zealots, to impose on the people, who declared this to them, that they should wait for deliverance from the Most High. And this was in order to keep them from deserting, and that they might be buoyed up above fear and care by such false hopes. Now a man that is in adversity does easily comply with such promises, and when such a seducer makes him believe that he shall be delivered from those miseries which oppress him, then it is that the patient abandons himself to hope. But when they, the Roman soldiers, went in numbers into the lanes of the city with their swords drawn, they slew those whom they overtook without mercy. So now they are beyond. There is no There's no giving yourself up. There's no surrendering. These soldiers are just in a blind rage and fury, and they're just slicing and dicing as they go. Okay, so they slew those whom they overtook without mercy, and set fire to the houses where the Judeans had fled, and they burned every soul in them, and laid waste a great many of the rest. And when they were come to the houses to plunder them, they found in them entire families of dead men, and the upper rooms full of dead corpses, that is, of such as who died by the famine. They then stood in horror at the sight, and went out without touching anything. But although they had this commiseration for such as were destroyed in that manner by the famine, yet they did not have the same commiseration for those that were still alive. But they ran every one through whom they met with, and obstructed the very lanes with their dead bodies, and made the whole city to run down with blood to such a degree, indeed, that the fire of many of the houses was quenched with these men's blood. And truly so it happened, that although the slayers left off at the evening, yet did the fire greatly prevail in the night, and all was still burning, when there rose the 8th day of the month upon Jerusalem, a city that had suffered so many miseries during the siege, that it always enjoyed as much happiness from its first foundation, but it would certainly have been the envy of the world. Nor did it on any other account so much deserve these sore misfortunes, as by producing such a generation of men as were the occasion of its overthrow. And here is a picture I found by David Roberts, done in 1850, called The Siege and Destruction of Jerusalem. Now when Titus was come into this upper city, he admired not only some other places of strength in it, but particularly those strong towers, which the tyrants, which were the 3 Judean zealots, in their madness had relinquished. To conclude, when he entirely demolished the rest of the city and overthrew its walls, he left these towers as a monument of his good fortune. And now, since his soldiers were already quite tired with killing men, and yet there appeared to be a vast multitude still remaining alive, Caesar gave orders that they should kill none but only those that were in arms and who would oppose them, but should take the rest alive. But together with those whom they had order to slay, they slew the aged and the infirmed. But for those that were flourishing, who were in their flourishing age, and who might be useful to them, they drove them together into the temple and shut them up within the walls of the court of the women. But of the young men he chose out the tallest and most beautiful, and reserved them for the triumph. And as for the rest of the multitude that were about 17 years old, he put them into bonds and sent them to the Egyptian mines. Titus also sent a great number into the provinces as a present to them, that they might be destroyed upon or in the theaters by the sword and by the wild beasts. But those that were under 17 years of age were sold as slaves. Now during the days wherein Fronto, who was Caesar's personal friend, was distinguishing these men, there perished for want of food 11,000. So I take that to mean that of all the ones that had survived, that they were going to spare after they killed off the aged and the infirmed, 11,000 of those perished for want of food. Now the number of those that were carried captive during this whole war was collected to be 97,000, as was the number of those that perished during the whole siege, 1,000 I'm sorry, 1,100,000 or 1,100,000. The greater part of whom were indeed of the same nation with the citizens of Jerusalem, but not necessarily belonging to the city itself. For they were come up from all of the country to the feast of unleavened bread, and were of a sudden involved in war, which at that very first occasioned so great a straitness among them, that there came a pestilential destruction upon them, and soon afterwards such a famine as destroyed them faster. So if I'm understanding that correctly, it sounds like there was some kind of pestilence, destruction, and then which then caused a famine for them, which destroyed them faster. Now this vast multitude is indeed collected out of remote places, but the entire nation was now shut up by fate as in prison, and the Roman army encompassed the city when it was crowded with inhabitants. Accordingly, the multitude of those that therein perished exceeded all of the destructions that either men or the Most High ever brought upon the world. For to speak only of what was publicly known, the Romans slew some of them. Some of them they carried away captives, and others they made a search of underground, and when they found where they were, they broke up the ground and slew all they met with. So there were, I didn't put this in here, but a lot of those zealots and the people with the zealots, when they could see that they weren't going to win, they went into the tunnels underground and were hiding under there, thinking that they were going to, wait things out. But it sounds like the Romans made a search of underground, and when they found them, or they broke up the ground, they found them, and then they killed them. So there were also found slain there over 2,000 persons underground, partly by their own hands, so ones that had committed suicide, and partly by each other. But chiefly they were destroyed by the famine. So according to Josephus, just to recap, 1,100,000 Judeans perished in the siege of Jerusalem. 237,000 alone perished in the last war and other sieges and battles, not including the multitudes who perished by famine and pestilence, which was about 14,000. Some hundreds of thousands in sullen despair committed suicide, and those that had families often killed their family members first, then themselves, after hugging and kissing them goodbye. This happened at Masada. About 97,000 were captured and taken to Rome. Before leaving Jerusalem, the Roman army not only demolished the buildings, but even dug up their foundations. Just several months before, Jerusalem had been the wonder of the world. At the beginning of the siege, more than 1.5 million Judeans, natives and visitors, lived in this city or around it, and now it lay in total ruins. In 73 AD, Masada was put under siege. In utter despair and hopelessness, the Judean commander ordered the garrison to destroy all of their supplies and then themselves. After taking counsel among themselves, 960 living souls consented to that horrid proposal rather than die at the hands of the Romans. If they were to die, then they would die as free persons, not allowing themselves to be tortured or their wives to be defiled. Men, women, and children took their seats upon the ground, offering their necks to the sword. 10 men. So, hold on real quick. So what happened is the head of every family, after kissing their family members goodbye and hugging them, they would kill their family members. So every head of every family killed their own family members. And then after all of the family members were killed, 10 men were selected to execute all of the others. and one of the 10 left was chosen to execute the other 9, and then when everyone else was gone, he would kill himself by falling on his sword. Josephus wrote, "The most marvelous building that was ever seen or heard of, with its amazing architecture and rich ornamentation, not to mention the glory of its holy places, was gone." He went on to state that there was no doubt that this was a judgment from the Most High, because the Romans had been given strict orders by Titus not to harm the temple itself, but in the fog and violence of war, it was completely destroyed, just as Yeshua had said it would be. Now, I found this this diagram, or this sketch or drawing or picture. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's in, I think it's in the Biblioteca of in France. So, but I made let's see, it says Gallica, and it's La Galerie Agréable du Monde. So I think if you want to know more, and there's a whole bunch of very, very interesting things in there. So you definitely might want to take a screenshot of this so that you can make it bigger and go to the website, because there's they also have pictures in there of when in the Intertestament period, when Antiochus Epiphanes, who was of the Greeks, came in, and they had inhabited Jerusalem and Judea before, so this was way before the Romans. So there's all kinds of interesting pictures and sketches in there. But anyway, what I found very interesting, I took a screenshot because I said, this is a close-up of the top of that building that I just showed you. And on the center structure, we can clearly see carved faces of the 4 living creatures as spoken of in Scripture. And this is actually a plate, which I found interesting. These pictures in here are from plates. So this is View 15, Plate 13E. So again, if you take a picture of it, you can look and see there's a face of a man, and of an eagle, and of an ox, and then I think that's a lion. And so I just quoted the scripture there that talks about, and for the entrance of the sanctuary, Solomon made doors of olive wood, the doorposts within the frame having 5 angles, and then it just talks about all of that, and then the pomegranates and the leaves and all of that. So just found that very, very interesting. Okay, so why? That's kind of, I was asking the Father, why? Why all this destruction? Like, what happened? What happened? Why were you so angry that you allowed this? And so I just felt strongly that I was supposed to go to the prophets, that the answers I was looking for to explain all of this destruction that Josephus talked about was in the prophets. And so let's go over there. So here's what I found, that the prophets Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Daniel were contemporaries. And so this means that their lives overlapped. However, Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, lived about 100 years earlier, and he foretold of the coming Babylonian captivity of 606 BC. And then in each one of these I have the scripture reference. And then Jeremiah preached to the people of the Most High and told them to accept the period of captivity as deserved punishment from the Most High and for their sins. And then Ezekiel spoke of the return from Babylon, and Daniel foretold what would happen to the Judeans after the time of the Babylonian captivity. So there were 3 times when the kingdom of Judah was carried into Babylon. The first was in 606 BC. It says certain of the royal family, including Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were taken captive, and they, of course, were young men. And then in 596 BC, many of the skilled craftsmen, priests, and other leading people were taken captive. And Ezekiel, who was about 22 years of age, was among them at this time. So it's just, a few short years after the 606 that they were taken. And then in 586 BC, the city of Jerusalem was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar's army, and the rest of the Judeans were taken as slaves to Babylon, according to Jeremiah chapter 39, and then 2 Kings 25, 1-11. And only a small remnant were left in the land, like just the poor people. Ezekiel was taken to Babylon when he was a very young man. His call to be a prophet was while he was in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar. So Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the 30th year, so he's getting this vision. This is his calling by the Most High to be a prophet, while he was already in Babylonian exile. Okay, so he's sitting among a bunch of exiles, and they're by the Chebar Canal. And then he says, and the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of the Most High. On the 5th day of the month, and it says it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Most High came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans. And above the expanse, so further on down in verse 26, because from that point on he's talking about the chariots of fire and the wheels within the wheels, which are the Ophanim, and the cherubim with the 4 faces. So there's all that description. And then verse 26, it says, and above the expanse, over their heads, there was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness with a human appearance. And upward from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire enclosed all around. And downward from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and there was brightness all around him. And he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak with you. So, I would like to say that just from a lot of the extra biblical and the Apocrypha books, and especially the Targum, whenever it talks about the word of the Most High, that is always capitalized, and it's designating like a person, okay, which is Messiah. We know that Messiah was the word. Okay, so I'm thinking he's seeing Messiah. My opinion. Wait, let me go back here for a sec. Yeah, he said, Son of man, stand on your feet and I will speak with you. And then Ezekiel chapter 8, Ezekiel says, in the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I sat in my house with the elders of Judah sitting before me, the hand of the Most High fell upon me there. Then I looked, and behold, a form that had the appearance of a man. Below what appeared to be his waist was fire, and above his waist was something like the appearance of brightness, like gleaming metal. So we're now at a different time. The other one that I just read was in Ezekiel 1. This is Ezekiel 8. So this is like, I think it's about a year later, I think. Wait, let me see. This one was in the 30th year of the 4th month. Okay, well, at any rate, it's sometime later. So he's seeing this figure again. I looked, and behold, and a form had the appearance of a man. Below what appeared to be his waist was fire, and above his waist was something like the appearance of brightness, like gleaming metal. He put out the form of a hand and took me by a lock of my head. And the Ruach lifted me up between earth and heaven and brought me in visions of the Most High to Jerusalem. So he's still in exile. He's still in Babylon, but he's being taken up in the Ruach, in the Spirit, to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the gateway of the inner court that faces north, where was the seat of the image of jealousy, which provokes to jealousy. And behold, the glory of the Most High of Israel was there, like the vision that I saw in the valley. Then he said to me, Son of man, lift up your eyes now towards the north. So I lifted up my eyes towards the north, and behold, north of the altar gate in the entrance was this image of jealousy. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The great abominations that the house of Israel are committing here to drive me far from my sanctuary? But you will still see greater abominations. And then he brought me to the entrance of the court. And when I looked, behold, there was a hole in the wall. Then he said to me, Son of man, dig in the wall. So I dug in the wall, and behold, there was an entrance. And he said to me, Go in and see the vile abominations that they are committing there. So I went in and I saw. And there engraved on the wall all around was every form of creeping thing and loathsome beast, and all of the idols of the house of Israel. And before them stood 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, with Jazaniah, the son of Shaphan, standing among them. Each had his censer in his hand, and the smoke of the cloud of incense went up. Then he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each in his room of pictures? For they say, The Most High does not see us, for the Most High has forsaken the land. He said also to me, You will see still greater abominations. Then he brought me to the entrance of the north gate of the house of the Most High, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then he said to me, Have you seen this, O son of man? You will see still greater abominations than these. And then he brought me into the inner court of the house of the Most High. And behold, at the entrance of the temple of the Most High, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs to the temple and their faces towards the east, worshiping the sun towards the east. Then he said to me, Have you seen this, O son of man? Is it too light a thing for the house of Judah to commit the abominations that they commit here, that they should fill the land with violence and provoke me still further to anger? Behold, they put the branch to their nose. Therefore I will act in wrath. My eye will not spare, nor will I have pity. And though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, I will not hear them. Let's see what I'm covering here. The book of Ezekiel has long been regarded as one of the more difficult books because it is written in apocalyptic terms. The following passages seem to speak of a coming destruction, especially considering that they were already in Babylonian exile. They were not in Jerusalem or Judea. And this is Ezekiel 5. Thus says the Most High, this is Jerusalem. I have set her in the center of the nations, with countries all around her. And she has rebelled against my rules by doing wickedness more than the nations, and against my statutes more than all the countries around her. For they have rejected my rules and have not walked in my statutes. Therefore, says the Most High, because you are more turbulent than the nations that are all around you, and have not walked in my statutes or obeyed my rules, and have not even acted according to the rules of the nations that are around you. Therefore, thus says the Most High, behold, I, even I, am against you, and I will execute judgments in your midst in the sight of the nations. And because of all of your abominations, I will do with you what I have never yet done, and the like of which I will never do again. Therefore, fathers shall eat their sons in your midst, and sons shall eat their fathers. And I will execute judgments on you, and any of you who survive, I will scatter to all the winds. Okay, which is what we just read of, right, from Josephus. This is also Ezekiel 5. He says, you have defiled my sanctuary with all of your detestable things and with all of your abominations. Therefore I will withdraw. My eye will not spare, and I will have no pity. A third part of you shall die of pestilence and be consumed with famine in your midst. A third part shall fall by the sword all around you. And a third part I will scatter to all the winds and will unsheath the sword after them. Okay, is that not what we just read? That happened. Thus shall my anger spend itself, and I will vent my fury upon them and satisfy myself. And they shall know that I am the Most High, their Elohim. That I have spoken in my jealousy, when I spend my fury upon them. Moreover, I will make you a desolation and an object of reproach among the nations all around you, and in the sight of all who pass by. You shall be a reproach and a taunt, a warning and a horror to the nations all around you when I execute judgments on you in anger and fury and with furious rebukes. I am the Most High. I have spoken. When I send against you the deadly arrows of famine, arrows for destruction, which I will send to destroy you, and when I bring more and more famine upon you and break your supply of bread, I will send famine and wild beasts against you, and they will rob you of your children. Pestilence and blood shall pass through you, and I will bring the sword upon you, for I am the Most High. I have spoken. So then, looking at Isaiah 1 says, how the faithful city has become a whore. She who is full of justice, righteousness lodged in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your best wine mixed with water. Your princes are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. They do not bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them. This is Hosea. The word of the Most High that came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. When the Most High first spoke through Hosea, he said to Hosea, "Go, take yourself a wife of whoredom, and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Most High." So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And the Most High said to him, "Call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." Okay, now Jeremiah. Yisrael forsakes the Most High. The word of the Most High came to me, saying, "Go and proclaim in the hearing of Jerusalem. Thus says the Most High, I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness, in a land not sown. Israel was holy to the Most High, the first fruits of his harvest. All who ate of it incurred guilt, and disaster came upon them. For long ago I broke your yoke, and I burst your bonds, but you said, I will not serve. Yes, on every high hill and under every green tree, you bowed down like a whore. Yet I planted you as a choice vine, wholly of pure seed. How then have you turned degenerate and become a wild vine? Though you wash yourself with lye and use much soap, the stain of your guilt is still before me. How can you say, I'm not unclean? I have not gone after the Baals. Look at your way in the valley. Look what you have done. A restless young camel running here and there, a wild donkey used to the wilderness, in her heat sniffing the wind. Who can restrain her lust? Okay, and now we have Ezekiel. And Ezekiel, the Most High used Ezekiel to really drive this home. And I think it was because Ezekiel was in the Babylonian exile with them. But this is pretty severe. Ezekiel 23. The word of the Most High came to me, Son of man, there were 2 women, the daughters of one mother. They played the whore in Egypt. They played the whore in their youth. There their breasts were pressed and their virgin bosoms handled. Oholah was the name of the elder sister, and Oholibah was the name of her sister. They became mine, and they bore me sons and daughters. As for their names, Oholah is Samaria. So talking about the northern kingdom of Israel. It's because Samaria was the capital. And Oholibah is Jerusalem. Oholah played the whore while she was mine. So he's talking about Samaria, or the northern kingdom. Played the whore while she was mine, and she lusted after her lovers, the Assyrians, warriors clothed in purple, governors and commanders, all of them desirable young men, horsemen riding on horses. She bestowed her whoring upon them, the choicest men of Assyria, all of them, and she defiled herself with all of the idols of everyone after whom she lusted. She did not give up her whoring that she had begun in Egypt, for in her youth men had lain with her and handled her virgin bosom and poured out their whoring lust upon her. Therefore I delivered her into the hands of her lovers, into the hands of the Assyrians after whom she lusted. These uncovered her nakedness. They seized her sons and her daughters. And as for her, they killed her with the sword, and she became a byword among women when judgment had been executed on her. Her sister, Oholibah, who is Jerusalem, saw this, and she became even more corrupt than her sister in her lust, in her whoring, which was worse than that of her sister. She lusted after the Assyrians, governors and commanders, warriors clothed in full armor, horsemen riding on horses, all of them desirable young men. And I saw that she was defiled. They both took the same way. But she, Oholibah, which is Jerusalem, carried the whoring further. She saw men portrayed on the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed in vermilion, wearing belts on their waists with flowing turbans on their heads, all of them having the appearance of officers, a likeness of Babylonians whose native land was Chaldea. When she saw them, she lusted after them and sent messengers to them in Chaldea. And the Babylonians came to her into the bed of love, and they defiled her with their whoring lust. And after she was defiled by them, she turned from them in disgust. And when she carried on her whoring so openly and flaunted her nakedness, I turned in disgust from her, as I had turned in disgust from her sister. Yet she increased her whoring, remembering the days of her youth when she played the whore in the land of Egypt, and lusted after her lovers there, whose members were like those of donkeys and whose issue was like that of horses. Thus, let me see. Is that? Yeah, okay. And then it says, for thus says the Most High, behold, I will deliver you into the hands of those whom you hate, into the hands of those from whom you turned in disgust, and they shall deal with you in hatred and take away all of the fruit of your labor and leave you naked and bare. And the nakedness of your whoring shall be uncovered. Your lewdness and your whoring have brought this upon you, because you played the whore with the nations and defiled yourself with their idols. You have gone the way of your sister, therefore I will give her cup into your hand. Thus saith the Most High, you shall drink your sister's cup, that is deep and large, and you shall be laughed at and held in derision, for it contains much. You will be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, a cup of horror and desolation, the cup of your sister Samaria. You shall drink it and drain it out, and gnaw its shards and tear your breasts. Then I said of her who was worn out by adultery. Okay, key words here. Adultery, right? Now they will continue to use her for a whore, even her. For they have gone into her as men go into a prostitute. Thus they went into Oholah and to Oholibah, lewd women. But righteous men shall pass judgment on them with the sentence of adulteress, right? You can only be an adulteress if you have been an unfaithful wife, an unfaithful bride. That's adultery. And blood is on their hands. For thus says the Most High, bring up a vast host against them, and make them an object of terror and plunder. And the host shall stone them and cut them down with their swords. They shall kill their sons and their daughters and burn their houses. Thus will I put an end to lewdness in the land, that all women may take warning and not commit lewdness as you have done. And they shall return your lewdness upon you, and you shall bear the penalty for your sinful idolatry, and you shall know that I am the Lord, the Most High. Okay, now this is Ezekiel 16, and I know it's small. The Lord's faithless bride. Again, the word of the Most High came to me, Son of man, Make known to Jerusalem her abominations, and say, Thus says the Most High to Jerusalem, Your origin and your birth are of the land of the Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite and your mother a Hittite. And as for your birth, on the day that you were born, your cord was not cut, nor were you washed with water to cleanse you, nor rubbed with salt, nor wrapped in swaddling cloths. No, I pitied you to do any of these things to you out of compassion for you. But you were cast out on the open field, for you were abhorred on the day that you were born. And when I passed by you and I saw you wallowing in your blood, I said to you in your blood, Live. I said to you in your blood, Live. I made you flourish like a plant of the field, and you grew up and became tall and arrived at full adornment. Your breasts were formed and your hair had grown, yet you were naked and bare. When I passed by you again and saw you, behold, you were at the age for love, and I spread the corner of my garment over you, and I covered your nakedness. I made my vow to you and entered into a covenant with you, declares the Most High, and you became mine. This gets me choked up. Then I bathed you with water, and I washed off your blood from you, and I anointed you with oil. I clothed you also with embroidered cloth, and I shod you with fine leather. I wrapped you in fine linen, and I covered you with silk. I adorned you with ornaments, and I put bracelets on your wrists and a chain on your neck. And I put a ring on your nose and earrings in your ears, and a beautiful crown on your head. Thus you were adorned with gold and silver, and your clothing was of fine linen and silk, and embroidered cloth. You ate fine flour and honey and oil. You grew exceedingly beautiful and advanced to royalty. And your renown went forth among the nations because of your beauty. For it was perfect through the splendor that I had bestowed upon you, declares the Most High. But you trusted in your beauty and you played the whore because of your renown, and you lavished your whorings on any passerby. Your beauty became his. You took some of your garments and made yourself colorful shrines, and on them you played the whore, the like as has never been nor ever shall be. You also took your beautiful jewels of my gold and my silver, which I had given you, and you made for yourself images of men, and with them you played the whore. And you took your embroidered garments to cover them, and you set my oil and my incense before them. Also, my bread that I gave you, I fed you with fine flour and oil and honey. You set them before, and you set before them for a pleasing aroma. And so it was, declared the Most High. And you took your sons and your daughters, which belonged to him, right? Jerusalem was his bride. Okay? And their children, the sons and daughters, belonged to him. But he said, whom you had borne to me, and these you sacrificed to them to be devoured. Were your whorings so small a matter that you slaughtered my children and delivered them up as an offering by fire to them? And in all your abominations and your whorings, you did not remember the days of your youth, when you were naked and bare and wallowing in your blood. Therefore, O prostitute, hear the word of the Most High. Thus says the Most High, your Elohim, because your lust was poured out and your nakedness uncovered in your whorings with your lovers and with all of your abominable idols, and because of the blood of your children that you gave to them. Therefore, behold, I will gather all of your lovers with whom you took pleasure, all those that you loved and all those you hated. I will gather them against you from every side, and will uncover your nakedness to them, that they may see all of your nakedness. And I will judge you as a woman who commits adultery. Okay, there again, adultery. She has been unfaithful to her husband. And she has shed blood and is judged. And I will bring upon you the blood of wrath and jealousy. And I will give you into their hands, and they shall throw down your vaulted chamber and break down your lofty places. They shall strip you of your clothes and take your beautiful jewels, and they will leave you naked and bare. They shall bring up a crowd against you, and they shall stone you and cut you to pieces with their swords. And they shall burn your houses and execute judgments upon you in the sight of many women. I will make you stop playing the whore, and you shall also give payment no more. So I will satisfy my wrath on you, and my jealousy shall depart from you. I will be calm and no more be angry, because you have not remembered the days of your youth, but you have enraged me with all of these things, declares the Most High. Have you not committed lewdness in addition to all your abominations? Excuse me. Behold, everyone who uses proverbs will use this proverb about you. Like mother, like daughter. You are the daughter of your mother who loathed her husband and her children, and you are the sister of your sisters who loathed their husbands and their children. Your mother was a Hittite, and your father an Amorite. And your elder sister is Samaria, who lived with her daughters to the north of you. And your younger sister, who lived to the south of you, is Sodom, with her daughters. Not only did you walk in their ways and do according to their abominations, within a very little time you were more corrupt than they in all of your ways. As I live, declares the Most High, your sister Sodom and her daughters have not done as you and your daughters have done. Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters have pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but they did not aid the poor and needy. So they were haughty and did an abomination before me, so I removed them when I saw it. Samaria has not committed half your sins. You have committed more abominations than they, and have made your sisters appear righteous by all of the abominations that you have committed. Bear your disgrace, you also, for you have intervened on behalf of your sisters, because your sins in which you acted more abominably than they are more in the right than you. So be ashamed, you also, and bear your disgrace, for you have made your sisters appear righteous. So, this is... come over here real quick. What I realized through this, and what I believe the Ruach showed me, is that Jerusalem was the whore of Babylon. Okay? We have been utterly lied to. There is not one good thing that has come out of the Catholic Church, the Catholic Universal Church. Okay? And so they've told lies. So if you've been in the churches for any length of time, they lead you to believe, their Jesuit pastors lead you to believe that Rome is the whore of Babylon. But how? Let me ask you a question. First of all, let's put on our critical thinking caps. At the time that these prophets were writing these things, okay, the Vatican did not exist. The Catholic Church did not exist. At the time of the fall of Jerusalem, at the time that Jerusalem was destroyed, Rome was there, as a pagan superpower, right? Rome was the fourth part of the statue that Daniel saw, right? The Catholic Church did not exist. So how could the Catholic Church be the whore of Babylon? Okay. Secondly, a whore is an adulteress. Okay. The Catholic Church was never married to the Most High. Who was the peculiar people? Abraham was pulled out of Ur. And the Hebrew people, the Israelites, were formed from Abraham, right? So it makes no sense if you think about this logically. There is no way that the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon. Jerusalem is. How many times did we read in there through all of those prophets? Every single one of those prophets called Jerusalem a whore. Okay, now why would she be called the whore of Babylon? Okay, where did Jerusalem spend 70 years? Think. Jerusalem was in Babylon. Okay, and what did her priests and her sages and her people pick up in Babylon? They picked up the Zohar, they picked up the Talmud, they picked up Kabbalah, they picked up mysticism, okay? And by the time that their captivity was ended and they were allowed to go back to Jerusalem, they had pretty much lost their language, okay? Which is where the Aramaic came into being, okay? And then think about in the time of Yeshua and John the Baptist, right? How many times did John the Baptist, or Johann the Baptizer, and Yeshua call those Pharisees a brood of vipers, the synagogue of Satan, right? Because they had picked up Babylonian customs and behavior in Babylon. And that is why Jerusalem became the whore of Babylon. She was adulterous. She was the wife of the Most High. And then I'm going to prove this to you as well. So let's come on. Okay. Although Rome was the prevailing pagan power in the first century, when the book of Revelation was written, the symbolism of the whore of Babylon refers not to an invading infidel or foreign power. The symbolism of the whore of Babylon, it refers to an apostate queen, a former bride who has been unfaithful. Okay, what do we call a bride, a wife that is unfaithful? She is a whore. She is an adulteress. Okay, and who, even though she had been divorced and cast out because of her unfaithfulness, continues to falsely claim to be queen. So the symbolism simply did not fit the case of Rome at the time. Okay, the Catholic Church, again here, the Catholic Church did not even come to be until in the 300s AD with Constantine. There was no Catholic Church until the 300s AD. Okay, in 70 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed, no Catholic Church, just pagan Rome as a military force. Okay, and this is who the Most High picked to discipline and destroy his people in Jerusalem. He used Rome. Okay, he is the Most High. He does what he does. He does not answer to us. Okay. So, proponents of this view that Jerusalem was the whore of Babylon suggest that the 7 mountains spoken of in Revelation 17:9 are actually the 7 hills on which Jerusalem stands. And the fall of Babylon in Revelation 18 is the fall and destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Okay, were you aware, were any of us aware that there were actually 7 hills which Jerusalem is on? Okay, and the fall of Babylon was the destruction in 70 AD. Jerusalem had become Babylon because her people had picked up so many of the pagan beliefs and customs while they were in Babylonian captivity. And this being on top of all the other times all throughout history that they had gone whoring after the idols of the other nations and the customs of the other nations, mixing themselves when they were told not to mix. That is, what is the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me. It's, the word, I'm sorry, I'm having one of those brain moments. The word that the churches will try to tell you, if like you have sex outside of marriage, okay, that's not what it means. What it means is if these people, if the inhabitants, the Israelites, were to go outside of their own people, okay, and they were mixing with the other nations of which they were told not to do because the Most High warned you will go after their gods, okay? So Jerusalem's 7 hills are Mount Scopus, Mount Olivet, and the Mount of Corruption. All 3 are peaks in a mountain range that lies east of the old city. And then there's also Mount Ophel. Then there was the original Mount Zion. And then there is the new Mount Zion on which the Antonia Fortress was built. Okay. And then we're told by Messiah himself in Matthew 23, 34 to 37, and also in Luke 11, 47 to 51. Yeshua, the Messiah, assigned all of the blood guilt for the killing of the prophets and the saints of all time to the Pharisees of Jerusalem, whom he called vipers, children of your father Satan, and the synagogue of Satan. Okay? In Revelation 17:6 and 18:20 and 24, almost identical phrasing is used in charging that very same blood guilt to Babylon. Okay? And Messiah said, "Nevertheless, I must go on my way today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet should perish away from Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. Behold, your house is forsaken, and I tell you, you will not see me until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Most High." Okay, so we had, this was just some of the martyrdom that I could find of the prophets at the hands of Judah's kings. The prophet Isaiah, according to the extra-biblical book, The Apocalypse of Isaiah and or The Martyrdom of Isaiah, Isaiah was killed by Manasseh, king of Judah, who reigned in 687 to 642 BC, and he was sawn in half while he was alive. And then the prophet Ezekiel says his death is estimated to have occurred about 570 BC in Babylonia. And while the Bible doesn't specify how he died, tradition suggests that he was killed for reprimanding leaders of his fellow exiled Judeans for their idol worship. Everything we just read about. And then the prophet Zechariah, son of Jehoiada, says the biblical account of his death is recorded in 2 Chronicles 24:20, and it says he was killed in the temple courtyard, Rabbinical literature expounds on this and describes Zechariah as a priest, prophet, and judge. His criticism of the king led to his death in the priest's courtyard of the temple on the Day of Atonement. Okay? And then, of course, who were the last two prophets? The last two prophets to be killed. Okay. Johanan, the baptizer, was a priest of the line of Aaron. Okay. From both his father Zechariah's side and also his mother Elizabeth's side. He was of the line of Aaron. And isn't it interesting that he is out in the wilderness and he's not serving in the temple? And we don't even know what happened to his father Zechariah and how he was killed. So Johanan was both a priest and a prophet, right? He prophesied of the coming of Yeshua, the Messiah. And he pointed out the sin of Herod with his brother's wife Herodias, okay? And he lost his head. He was killed, okay? And then we have Yeshua himself, who was a prophet, but he was also the last king of the line of David in Jerusalem. So both men prophets, but Johanan priest and Yeshua king. And the people, even though it was the Romans who crucified him, remember that there had been that event that occurred where the thief Barabbas was brought out, and Pilate had given the people a choice to choose who they wanted to be freed. Barabbas, who was a known criminal, or Yeshua, who was innocent. Okay? And the people of their own consent chose Barabbas to be freed and condemned Messiah to death. Not to mention this was done at the hands of the Pharisees, those brood of vipers of the synagogue of Satan. And so these last words, he says, this is Messiah, Yeshua, Matthew 23. Truly I say to you that all of these things will come upon these generations. Jerusalem, who killed the prophets and stoned the set-apart ones who were sent to you. Numerous times I longed to gather your people like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. And because of this, behold, your dwelling will become desolate. And I say that from today you will no more see me until you will say, blessed is he who comes in the name of Eloah. Okay. So, as I said, this was a really hard presentation to put together. Just so hard. Even going through this again, like I just have had such deep, deep grief in my spirit and in my heart. And it just, there's no words. And so as unpleasant as this was to talk about, we have to understand why the Most High's fury and rage was so strong, and why he did what he did, and that it is, I'm absolutely convinced that Jerusalem was the whore of Babylon. Okay, there's nobody else who fits that bill. Only she was his wife. And there is one more passage I want to read to you to prove that. Okay, I apologize. I forgot to put the slide in, so I'm just going to read it off my Bible app. One more proof that Jerusalem was the bride of the Most High and why she was called the whore. This is Revelation 21, and this is John the Revelator. And he says, Revelation 21, verse 1, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first," so this is after, backstory, this is after this will be at the very end time. This is the vision he saw when all the thrones are coming down, the Most High will come down, the books are going to be opened, the sea will give up its dead, the graves will give up its dead, and this is after the great judgment, okay? And he said, "I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from the Most High out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband." The New Jerusalem. Okay, the old Jerusalem was destroyed. And that farce going on over the state of Israel right now is not biblical in any way, okay? And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of the Most High is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and he himself shall be with them, and he will be their Elohim." Okay? And then I'm going to go down to verse 9. And it says, "And there came unto me one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, and I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from the Most High, having the glory of the Most High. And her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and the names written thereof, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. Okay, and then it says, on the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Okay, so right there, we're told twice at the beginning, he says, "Behold, the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming out of heaven, prepared as a bride." And then we're told, a bride for whom? Okay? The great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from the Most High. And she is prepared as the bride and to be the Lamb's wife. So that is what we have to look forward to. So as always, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I know that this was a really hard video, very somber, and just a lot of hard things, but we needed to know why Jerusalem was judged so strongly. Okay, so in our next video will be much lighter, and we're going to pick up and we're going to trace, just like we traced the northern kingdom where they went, we're going to trace the different places that the survivors that survived the destruction, which according to that prophecy in Ezekiel sounds like there was about a third that survived. And we're going to talk about and show all the various places that they went to. So I look forward to seeing you next time, and I hope you're blessed, and I wish you shalom and peace, and try to stay well and take care of yourselves. Okay, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.